Right, thank you very much, James. Always enthusiastic welcome there. So this is the final session we have on our visualization week. So if you've missed any of the previous sessions, they're all available to catch up. So please do make use of those. What we wanted to focus on today is we're going to have a look at data guided decisions. So we're actually going to have a bit of a deeper dive into WinCC Unified and focus on some of the options. So some of the plant option intelligence options we've released with WinCC Unified. If you're still wondering what WinCC Unified is and how it's sort of positioned, I've already delivered some time ago on the 27th of April. We had a tech talk focused on an introduction to WinCC Unified. So if you're new to the product, then it's well worth having a look at that to give you an idea of sort of how it's positioned. So what we're going to have a look at today is, as I mentioned, the plant intelligence options. We've got some live demos. So I'm joined today by our automation specialist for the SCADA product range, Colin Street. Who's going to give us some live demos of two of the plant intelligence options. So we're going to have a look at performance insight and the calendar options, and then I'll wrap up the session looking at the plant intelligence licensing concept and some of the promotion packages we brought out, because these are new options we've brought to market in the last sort of month or so. So we have some bundled packages available, and we can take a look at those. Well, okay, so without further ado, let's crack on. So here we are now with the introduction section. So just a quick recap for you. So WinCC Unified introduced with Tier Portal version 16, which was released just before Christmas, so December 2019. So our next generation HMI visualization system, engineered out of Tier Portal, a common visualization platform that applies to both the next generation comfort panels, the unified comfort panels, which have also been released in April, and the PC based platform. So now within visualization within Tier Portal, we have true commonality across the visualization platform, from panels all the way through to PC based systems. So across the different options that we have with WinCC Unified, we don't have, I guess, a single sort of visualization solution that we make application specific. We don't sell visualizations just into one industry. So what you get from Siemens is a visualization system that's applied to a lot of different types of industries and applications. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of the types of applications that we would be involved in. So you get this crossover between some of the strengths that maybe you get certain sort of features that may be requested in a automotive industry, for instance, and we can bring those into the products and then use them in other industries, for instance, water, OEM, whatever. So we have one common visualization system for all use cases and applications. So we can make our visualization systems more sort of application specific or industry specific or architecture specific by the addition of options. So we can scale up by adding additional tags, additional clients, these sort of things, and we can add additional options depending on the requirements of the user for things like data analytics and things like this. So these are through the use of options. The options that we have, we kind of split into these three sort of central areas. So the core options, the basic options, the SCADA, and the plant intelligence options. So what I wanted to do is just give you a quick overview so we can see how we position these options, what's available, and what's coming into the future. So what we'll see is a few of these options will have an indication there saying in excess of V16. So these are a couple of options that we don't have currently available with the release of WinCC Unified, but are very firmly on the roadmap and will be coming to the product range soon. So let's dive into the option categories first, and let's have a quick look at what we've got. So the first option category that we're going to have a look at here is the core options. So these are common options to all sort of HMI visualization systems. So this is within WinCC Unified, what we'd say is really the core of the product itself. So when you do a base install of WinCC Unified, whether it's on a PC-based system or you're using it on a panel, you have this core functionality. Some of these are very obvious. Modern user interface, it's a visualization system, so we need the ability to actually visualize. Of course, alarming as well. So alarming, key strength of Siemens visualization systems, very, very powerful alarming system. And of course, you expect that as standard, whether it's a panel or a PC-based platform. A lot of the functionality we have within the visualization systems, we would say it's really sort of configured rather than requiring a lot of engineering effort to do so. But a lot of applications do require a certain amount of customization or scripting. Maybe you need to interface to some legacy systems, maybe have some custom applications that you want to apply into your visualization system. So we have a very, very powerful scripting engine, of course, that we support as our core offering. Openness is another key feature of Unified and one of the strengths that we have. So we support openness in terms of the engineering of WinCC Unified, and openness has a very specific meaning within the tier portal. So we have an openness API. So this is an open published API that you can come and download that will give you information about how you can programmatically auto-generate projects within tier portal, and how you can carry out functions that you might ordinarily carry out via sort of mouse clicks and drag and drop via code external to tier portal. So we support for WinCC Unified openness for the engineering environment, and we support openness for the runtime environment. So you might want to use this if you want to bring out sort of mass data in runtime, connect using sort of ODK type functions into other systems. Another core feature we have is a technological hierarchy. It's got a little star by it there. So this is saying for the PC system only at the moment. So we'll focus on this a little bit more when we're looking at the plant intelligence option. So this is a key requirement of the plant intelligence option. We exploit this technological hierarchy for actually scaling up and utilizing some of the object-based engineering that we do. Connectivity. So this is an extension, I guess, of the openness runtime, how we connect into other systems via either the open pipe interface that we have, or using the openness runtime API. Reporting is common also, and a core feature without additional sort of license requirements for the panel and the PC-based system. And finally, there in the core option, we have the user administration. Of course, we want to manage users directly on the panel or centrally, so the ability to set up users and manage those is core functionality within WinCC Unified. Moving over, we've got what we call the basic options. So the basic options can also apply to panels or PC-based systems, but they are sometimes add-ons. So maybe you buy an additional license to use a basic option. So an example there is, for instance, on the PC-based system with a client, you get a single client for local visualization, and also with every license, you get an additional client. So you could have remote access to your PC-based system using an additional client. But of course, it's a basic option, so we could scale it up. So you might say, well, my customer wants another 10 clients. You can just buy a license for another 10 clients and apply those directly to your base system. We also have logging. So WinCC Unified on the panel and PC-based platforms supports the SQLite, so we can do file-based logging. So included with the product, and very, very powerful logging concept. And it's a seamless concept in terms of scaling up to a full relational database. We use the same schemas, so you can move from one to the other. Another basic option we have is collaboration. This is unique to WinCC Unified. So the concept of collaboration allows different WinCC Unified systems to collaborate with each other. So we could have a WinCC Unified system on a PC and one on a panel, so two different systems. And through the concept of collaboration, they can share screens, tags, parameters, archive. So you don't have to go and engineer that, you just license it, and then you have the ability to share or collaborate in runtime. Next, as an option, we have the parameter control, which you may know from sort of previous systems as maybe the recipe control or user archives if you are a user of WinCC v7. And this is how we can get user context data from maybe another system, a high-level sort of sequencing or batching system or something like that. We can get parameters or recipes directly into Unified and then download these to the PLCs. And then we have the diagnostics and audit options, and there it indicates that these are not currently released, but as I mentioned earlier, very, very firmly on the roadmap for introduction into Unified. So where we're going to focus the session today is around our SCADA and PI options. PI options are plant intelligence options. So these are specific add-ons that we have for the Unified product range, allowing us to perform particular sort of functions in addition to the base functionality of Unified. So an example here is like Performance Insight that we'll focus on today. So let me quickly go through the SCADA and PI options we have. So the first one, we have logging. We also showed logging on the previous slide as one of the basic options. So this is actually referring to the database in terms of a relational database. So this is a full Microsoft SQL database. This is, of course, only on a PC-based platform because we can't run the Microsoft SQL database on the panel. We just don't have the performance and hardware in the panel. So if you require a relational database, you would need to use the WinCC Unified PC-based runtime. So another option, Performance Insight, we'll focus on this and the calendar options. So this is where we're going to have the focus of our live demonstrations today. Another two options, which have also very recently been released, is we have the sequence execution system. So this is our batching system. So ISO 88 batching, so where we can actually configure batches based on sort of step transitions. So if you have a sequence, a repeatable sequence, we can actually control this in a step transition methodology. We also then have line coordination. And line coordination is an option that allows us to integrate disparate underlying systems into a coordinated sort of visualization and control system. So you may have a situation where, as an end user, you have different machines from different OEMs. Maybe they have Siemens systems on, maybe they have third-party systems on, and you want the ability to obviously operate as a line rather than individual machines. And you want the ability to actually start doing sort of diagnostics and analytics based on a line. So an example there would be, while we might be able to do sort of OEE on a machine basis, actually what you're really interested in is the overall availability of the complete line. So there we could use the line coordination system, for instance, to filter analytics up to a line coordination controller and actually perform line-based analytics. The other two options that we have on this little wheel here are the central logging. So this is the central SQL database. So rather than running a local Microsoft SQL database on the WinCC Unified PC-based system, here is a scenario where we may need to retain data for significantly longer. You know, so if we need, I don't know, 10 years worth of data, we need a larger sort of database, disk arrays, all this sort of stuff, or where we've got multiple underlying WinCC Unified systems. So let's say we've got, I don't know, 10, 20 different PC-based WinCC Unified systems, and we want to centralize the archiving into a single point for the purposes of data integrity and purposes of reporting. We could have all those independent systems archiving their data into a central database. And finally, there we have redundancy. So, yeah, a key option in sort of high availability SCADA systems. Yeah, as it says there, not released with the first release of WinCC Unified version 16. This will come a little bit later. So that was it in terms of how the options are kind of split up and sort of categorized, and a quick overview of what they are. So let's have a look at how we sort of use the options between the different platforms that we have. So we can see a little chart that we've got here where we're showing at the bottom axis, we're showing the application size or application complexity, and then we're showing across sort of functionality going upwards. So application size. So if we look in the bottom left-hand corner here, we can see if we've got a low functionality, low scale application, this is certainly more tailored towards a unified panel. Okay, so this is maybe machine-based control. And as we move up in terms of the requirements of the application, so this could be an increase in terms of the total numbers of tags, this could be the total numbers of clients required, or just the amount of sort of analytics and computing power required to actually perform the application, we start moving towards a PC-based platform. So it's not clear cut whether you use a panel or a PC, but in terms of the engineering process, you could certainly start engineering based on a panel, and if the application got too big, seamlessly move over to a PC-based platform for deployment of your application. So the WinCC Unified core functionality is supported across the panel and PC runtime systems, and the WinCC Unified basic options are also supported across the Unified panel and PC runtime systems. On the Unified SCADA options and the Unified Plant Intelligence options, so the last options we covered on that little wheel, these are only available on the PC-based platform. So here's a key sort of demarcation. If you require the functionality of, for instance, a calendar or redundancy, your system needs to be a PC-based platform rather than a panel. So that's a little bit of sort of positioning in terms of the options. Let's go and have a look now at our two focus options for this session. So the first one we're going to have a look at is Performance Insight. Performance Insight is an add-on option that we have for WinCC Unified, tailored towards the generation of KPIs and dashboarding, let's say. So we have a number of defined sort of KPIs formulas to this ISO 22400 standard. What we talk about with KPIs, I guess each individual sort of business will have its own sort of business-specific KPIs, but common ones would be things like OEE and quality and piece counts and downtime and things like this. And we'll have a look at some of these examples when we go through the live demo. So the KPI engineering is object-based, and it uses this technological hierarchy that I mentioned earlier, and we'll get a better understanding of how this works when we look at the engineering and runtime in the live demo. So we get additional WinCC controls for the Performance Insight. So we get standardized controls for the visualization of our KPIs. So like pie charts, bar charts, Gantt controls, table controls, these sort of things. So we can easily display our sort of KPIs for building up our dashboard. So you get pre-configured controls, which also can be customized. We can use it for the purposes of downtime analysis to find out why we may have some unplanned downtime. And we can also use it calculation of performance of machines, lines, complete plants, application of various different contexts that we can apply to it as well. So for instance, we could look at different shift patterns. We could look at the comparison of day shift versus night shift. And because we're archiving the data, we can have a look at this over different time periods as well. Finally, not only can we visualize it directly in the WinCC Unified system itself, but we can also expand this out onto reporting using the WinCC Unified Excel-based reporting tool. So the next option we're going to have a look at is the calendar option. So the calendar option is how we can plan our production or machine operations by calendars using shifts, taking into account different shift timings, taking into account things like breaks, bank holidays, weekends, all these sort of stuff. So the calendar option also uses the technological hierarchy as a basis and allows us to define the actual working times of machines and systems. So we can create standard templates, which we can then apply those calendars to plant objects within our runtime system. And we'll have a look at this in live. We have the ability to combine the options, so we could use them independently, Performance Insight or Calendar, and they have their own specific use cases independently. But it's quite powerful when we combine them as well. So an example here is we're showing how we might want to have underlying OEE calculations based on a machine level. And how we might want to actually start integrating the OEE calculation by a shift context. So we share a central time model, a central time category between them so we can actually see what the uptime, downtime is over the overall system, and then we can use the calendar to actually apply shift patterns and working patterns onto that for the ability of performing KPIs specific to the shift. So one thing that we'll have a look at when we go through the live demo is we'll have a look at this standard time model. So both the options that we use for calendar performance insight require the definition of a time model that we can use throughout our project. So this is the definition of when we have time to actually produce, when is planned uptime, when is planned downtime, and then we can start looking at unplanned downtime. So an example here is we've got the time broken into production time, a break, some free or undefined time, and then downtime. And within these, we can specify specific reasons. So a lot of companies will have these already defined, or we can use open source standards that are already defined for these sort of states, OMAC or something like that. Okay, so that's me in terms of an introduction to what it is we're going to look at this point. I'm going to pass you over to Colin Street. So you're there, Colin? Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah. Just I'll let you panic for a bit.
Okay. Do you want to take control? And
yeah, I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. So what I'd like to do first of all is show the runtime environment, just basically to look at what we want to try and achieve with performance insight. So essentially, I've got my runtime system, and my runtime system is based on the HMI template suite that we looked at earlier in the week. So the first area that I'm going to look at would be the machine data, and this will give us a little bit of an explanation of what we want to try and achieve. So if I click on machine data, what we have is we have three machines. We have an in-feed machine, we have a main machine, and we have a out-feed machine as well. The three machines are recording the number of items produced and the number of rejects, and then using script within this faceplate, we're calculating the good items. It's also cycling through various states. So, for example, setup, material jam, mechanical failure, etc. And these different states are being reflected within the light stacks. We also have here some gauges which are showing, again, the number of items produced and the rejects, and then calculating the good items based on this information. So if I now switch to the engineering environment, let's have a quick look at two things that we want to try and use. So firstly, the machine data is coming from a PLC. So I'm just using a 1511. The machine data is basically recording for us or supplying the state of the machine, the number of total products made, and the number of rejects. And then we also have the product max. That's the rated machine speed. So how many should it be making? So for example, with that, you could then work out your performance type of thing. I'm also showing here the states. So my machine states, I have, for example, 0 to 9 is maintenance, 10 to 19 is setup, etc. So these are the states that I'm going to then use within Performance Insight. If I use these states within Performance Insight, I can then use them within the Gantt view, which shows us the states of the different machines. So let's just close these down now. We don't need this. So as Dan mentioned, Performance Insight uses the technological hierarchy, and the way we access the technological hierarchy is by selecting this tab here, which is the plant objects. If we click on the plant objects, we then get our plant view that we'll look at later, but we then get a common data area. And the common data area, when we've installed Performance Insight, gives us the performance indicators and the time model. So the first thing I'll do is I'll double click on the time model. So if we click on the time model, this is common. It's common for the calendar option, and it's common for Performance Insight as well. So if I just expand this out now, we can then see my time model has got various states. So it has a running state, a stop state, and it also has a state, for example, production and unplanned downtime and action. These have been check marked for relevant for calendar. So we'll be able to use these different times from within the time model to actually populate our calendar. So this would be the first step that we'd have to do for the calendar control, and it's quite a simple step. It's just put a tick in a box. If I expand all of this out, we can then see the different states that we come into. So I've actually nested the time model. Some said I'm going to have a running state. I've got a startup and automatic. They then have the different states below them that are recorded for the Gantt view. And here we then also have the different colours that are going to be applied. So that's essentially the steps that we go through for taking our time model or creating our time model. So we'll just close this down. So the next section we would look at for performance insight would be the performance indicators. We'll move off the global KPIs first of all, because you actually need operands and calculations, etc., before you can create your KPIs. So we'll move on to the global operands first of all. And the global operands have two forms. We have a counter form, and a counter is basically something that will actually record items. And what we need to do with a counter is we say, what is the counter type going to be? So is it going to be an incremental type? Is it going to be a manual counter, or are we going to have it incremental with limits? So I've just chosen incremental, which basically means every time I record the total, it's going to add it to the count. We then have numeric operands, and numeric operands are basically just a number that we can then evaluate. This would be, for example, like machine speed, if you wanted to use that for your performance KPI. We then have global cycles or global calculation cycles, and I've created one here called minute KPI. So essentially, if I click on this calculation here and look at the actual calculation information, I have a mode, and I've said my mode for executing this calculation is going to be based on a tag. So essentially what will happen is when the tag changes, it will record for me or it will calculate for me the KPI that I choose, and it will give me the last minute, 1 minute's worth of data. We also have another option, which is a context. And if we select calendar as the context is shift ID. And we need to remember this because we'll use this later on. So ultimately, we're just going to stick with tag. OK, so we can just undo that change here. OK. So we've looked at the global operands and the global cycles. Now we can look at our global KPIs. So our global KPIs, we can group them. So I've had a group called counts. And essentially, your KPIs can be based on, for example, counters and numeric operands. So as we expand out our counters and operands and we look at our KPI formula, we just basically drag the element into our formula, and this will then form the KPI for us. So essentially, with my counts, what I've done is I've said for my total items, I'm going to sum up the total items from my counters. For my total rejects, I'm going to sum up my total rejects. And then my good item is basically these two KPIs taken away from each other. So my total minus my rejects gives me my good items. I'm also using my KPI good item up here for my quality, where I take my good items and then I'm also dividing this by my total items. This gives me my quality KPI. And then my performance is basically saying how many items I produced within that period and how many items should I have produced. So this is then saying what is the maximum my machine should actually run to. You can also, within your KPI, use your time model as well. So we can drag the complete times in or the different subsections of times for producing our KPIs. So we've now defined our KPIs and we've defined our time model, but we need to actually place those in an object. So let's just close the editor down again. And to do this, we'll look at our plant object types. Now I have 3 plant object types. The first one is a line, and essentially if I expand out my plant object or my plant view, we see the top area here is the line. So that the first plant object is very basic. That just allows me to create a hierarchy. I have another plant object, which is the main one, which is called machine. And this is then going to represent our in feed, our main, and our out feed. So our out feed is on a different line. And then I also have one called time control. So if I actually expand these down as well, they actually have a sub plant object type, the in feed, and the main, which is a time control object as well. So if I quickly look at this, just the time control object basically has a very basic interface. It's got a heater, a chiller, a temperature, and lights. And I'm actually going to use this within the calendar because the calendar has the ability to turn off and on or change variable values based on schedules. So this is why we've added these here. Okay, so let's close this down now. If we go to our main machine, this is where we start adding all the different information for our KPIs. So I then move this out of the way. The first thing that we will look at is the interface. So the interface is based on the PLC data type that we created. So it's bringing back the state, the total products, the total rejects, and what it should have produced as a maximum. And if we click on some of these elements here, what we have is we have the ability, and we must do this, to actually log the variable. So each of these inputs for this this plant object type is actually being logged to the database for us when that changes. That means that we can then use this data that we've logged to calculate the KPI. So if we look at the state, that's being logged, that the total product is being logged as well, etc., etc. What we also then have is some internal variables that are associated with this plant object type. So I'm actually, I've got a total count for my logging. I have a total for my rejects. And then I'm also got, because I want to do my 1 minute cyclic KPI, I've got my cyclic goods, cyclic rejects, etc., etc. What we also have here is a trigger. This trigger is going to be used to trigger the global KPI that will provide the 1 minute result for us and store it in a variable. Okay, when we install Performance Insight, we get an extra tab in our plant object type setup, and we end up with this here, Performance Indicators. So if we click on Performance Indicators, the first thing we've got is the KPI. So if I click on KPI, it's got some general information. It's got a formula. We can't change this because it's set within the formula that we've set under the common data. So this is just the general information. But the interesting thing is the calculation cycle. Here we can actually add whether we want this specific KPI to have a calculation cycle, which it is going to do. And it's also then going to be recorded in our cyclic total tag, which has the cyclic total logging tag. And I've done this for all of these KPIs, so they've all got their cyclic KPI being logged. Within the next section here under operands, this is where we link our interface to the elements that we want to populate for our KPIs. So my total item counter is coming from my total products as a source tag. But what happens is, because that's a counter, it needs a source and a target. So the source is the value that's changing, and then the target is this ever increasing count or the running total as we look at. If we then took the example of just the numeric wants just the value that's going to be populated for the KPI. We then have the machine states. So within the machine states, this gives us a look at the actual time model that we developed under here. And what we can then do is we can click on the different time models, and we can actually say that we want to use that machine state within our plant object. So here I've said I want to use it, and the source tag is the state that's coming in from the actual plant object type. One of the things that I forgot to mention was the actual time model. If we double click on it, I'm using a value-based or a range-based evaluation, and this was why I showed you the list. So here I've got my low limit, high limit. So 20 to 29 is actual startup in automatic, it's 30 to 49. So that was basically replicated on my text list. Okay. So we then added our machine states, and then we have our calculation cycle. And under the calculation cycle, this is where we specify the trigger tag that brings this for us. So that when this trigger tag changes on the plant object type instance, the calculation will be done, and we'll get a minute's worth of calc for us. So let's then close this down. Okay. So if we actually want to populate the actual plant view, it's basically just a drag and drop exercise. So we drag and drop this onto the actual plant view to populate the variable. I've actually populated these already, so I'm just going to open the instances of these. So for example, I'll just open the instance of the in feed, and then under here, this has got our actual variable that we're talking to the PLC with. We've then got any alarms, performance indicators, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the basic setup for our performance insights. The next basic setup we would look at would be for the calendar. So if I open the main level here on line 1, this has been activated to have the calendar set for it. Now the calendar, we only activate it at the root level, and then it's transferred down to the sub or to the lower levels. So we only really need to activate it at the top. These will inherit it below. From the calendar option here, we just say what's our time, so what's our time zone, what's our default shift length, day of the first week, first 4-day week, when's our first shift going to start, etc., etc., normal working day. But we also have, if we just move down here, we also have the ability to specify variables that the calendar can access. So I've got my time control 1 and 2, which I can actually access from the calendar control to make changes to these actually during runtime. Okay, so once we've actually configured our KPIs, we then need to actually place them onto a screen. So if we look at the screens that have been developed, I've got under my screen section, I've got some screens here that show the basic key performance indicator controls that we can actually use within the actual screens. So here I've got a performance bar chart control. So if I just look at this, because the controls are generally the same the way we set them up, they have an interface, and the interface essentially allows us to select the number of KPIs. So I've selected the number of KPIs from the different machines. I've said I want total items, total rejects, good items, and quality. So this will come from the in feed. This section here will come from the main machine, etc. So the KPI settings, the setup is identical for most of the controls. I've also said that I want it to be online, so it'll automatically update. And I've also added a time range as well. So my time range essentially says I'm going to have a from and to time, which is a referent of a minute. So it's going to just calculate a minute's worth of KPI and display it on the screen for me. So we've now got the under my controls, we're going to look at these various controls that we have as an option. So we've got a performance analyzer control. This allows us to look at the KPI values over a minimum of a 3-hour period. We then have a performance chart, a bar chart, which will show us information from various KPIs. We have a performance control where we can put multiple KPIs and time ranges and compare them. We've then got a Gantt control, a performance overview control, and a pie chart as well. And then we've got our plant overview control, which we're going to look at. Essentially, for the setup for the calendar is placed on a screen, and then under its interface section, we have to tell it what plant object that we're going to look at, and in my case, it's the line object. So essentially, this is now complete and set up. So we're now able to jump back into the runtime. So within the runtime section, now we're going to look at the various controls that we've placed on the screen. So we've now got our pie and bar control. So if we look at the pie and bar control, that's actually going to show us the results of the different machines. And it's going to update on every 10 seconds and it will calculate for us the previous minute's worth of KPI. So these are the the bar and the pie control. Under the hierarchy, this is where we're going to look at the plant view. So if I expand the plant view down, this is the plant view that we saw within our technological hierarchy. Now what we have here is the screen window, which is acting as a companion control to this control here. So I can click on infeed, and this will show me the pie and the bar chart for infeed. If I click on main, this will show me the pie and the bar for main. If I click on outfeed, it will show me the same for outfeed. So the next control that we might look at would be the analyzer control. The analyzer control has a minimum of, like I say, a minimum of 3 hours. You can't go any shorter than this. And what we're doing here is we're showing for me, the last 3 hours worth of the minute calculated KPI. So this is then showing, and we can analyze this information. It's very easy to add a KPI. That was a zoom in. Let's go back to the actual level. We can also add to this KPI if we wanted to. So I could add an indicator, maybe the infeed again. We'll go for a total item. So we can say infeed, an operand, counters, total items. We can just add this because we want to have a look at it for analysis purposes, and that will then apply it. We can then zoom in to see a bit more information if we want to, and that's going to keep zooming in so that we can look at the detail of the values in more detail for us. All of the controls have an export as well, so we can always export this information to a CSV file and it will go into your downloads folder. Under the control option, we're able, in my case, to then start looking at KPIs from different times. So this is showing my good items and total items based on different time ranges. So here, if we look at the time, we've got 2 times. A minute ago, that's showing an hour, which is incorrect. So here we can then say, actually show me 1 minute for 1 minute. Let's apply and OK. So we've now got this data coming in. So I'm now showing 9:45 to 9:46 and showing 9:44 to 9:45. So the previous 2 minutes. This will probably be based on shifts, to be honest with you. We then have an overview control. And the overview control allows us to then look at the different states that the machine has been in. So, for example, I can then turn off some of the indicators here. So let's just keep with the infeed. Under the main, we'll turn off total items and total rejects because we don't want them. And we'll do the same with outfeed. And we'll just press apply. And now this is just going to show me the items and rejects for this 10-minute period just for that single machine. Again, the last view we have that we can look at would be the Gantt view. The Gantt view shows us the information from the time model, the different states that the machine goes into. So we can see now machine, this is in automatic mode. These are different times it's been in automatic mode. So we can then start comparing the different machine states across, in my case, my 1 minute period. We can also then show it in a view where they butt up to each other. So then we can start seeing the different time ranges that we have. We're also able to export this as well for further analysis as a CSV file. So these are the basic controls. We can now have a look at calendar. So the calendar control, the way the calendar control works is we require templates and so shift templates, a work template, and also action templates. So what we have is we can create our own calendar, or we can actually import a calendar. So I'm going to import a calendar that I created. Say OK. So here's my shift now. So now I've got my production, break, etc., etc. This is my planned calendar. I then have my templates. I've got my single day shift production shift, and also we have one here which is my day template as well. So to add these onto the planning, all we need to do is just take, for example, our standard shift, and we just drag this and drop it to where we'd like it to reside. So we'd like that to be 6 in the morning. There's now my day shift for today. I press save. Under templates also, we have the action templates. So I've also got one which is called heater. So under planning, for example, I could take my temperature action template, for example, and I can just drop that somewhere on the day shift. And then what will happen here is from this time onwards, the system will then start incrementing the temperature, maybe as like a preheat or something like this. One of the things I mentioned when we were developing the KPIs was the shift ID. So the shift ID is where we specify a numeric number or something that changes where the KPI can be calculated based on a shift. So if we have this shift ID as 1, for example, and then this shift ID as 2, and we had a calendar-based KPI, when it changed from the day shift here to this day shift, it would calculate the KPIs associated with this shift for us and store them. Okay. One of the other examples that people often ask is, can we access these KPI objects via scripts, for example? So this last sort of example before I hand back to Dan is to actually show how we can access these objects using script. So when I click this button here, it's going to pass the in-feed KPIs and date and time parameters to these two controls. So I select in-feed. First things it does is says, right, there's my pi control, and it places it on the screen. So we've now got our bar, etc. I can also then say add main, for example. So now I've got in here, I can switch between the in-feed and the main. So now I've got the in-feed and main. And now here I have the ability to toggle or highlight the different elements. So here we can then say, as I move along, it highlights the sets of bars that are associated with the item. So I can add the outfeed. So I've now got 3 items on here and 3 items on here. So what can we also do? We can actually access this control. We can say, well, let's remove the window. We want to make it a little bit prettier. This would be maybe for on an and-on board or something like this. We can then say, tell you what, let's just have the data. So we just want the data. We don't want anything else. And we like it a little bit bigger. So well, let's reposition and size it. OK, so now this is going to be on an overhead screen so people can see this. And then we can say, well, I'll tell you what, let's change the style as well. So then we can access the style. So we've now got a donut type of style for our KPI here. And we've also got a bar chart as well. One of the last things that we may consider looking at with our performance insight would be the reporting options. So if we then looked at our reporting option, if I go to my report section, we've got a report here, which is called Performance Insight. So I've created a report, and the Performance Insight is actually grabbing the data from our in-feed, our total, etc. So we've got our in-feed data from our Performance Insight, we've got our main, and we've got our outfeed. We've also then got general data that we can bring through, and we've also got a tab here that we can actually have a quick look at. So when you add one of the plant intelligence options, that actually adds extra functionality to the reporting option. So if we look at the reporting option and we connect to the system, it's going to ask me to log in. So we'll log in as the user, and then we're going to pass the password to it. OK, so now it's gone and it said, right, I've got all this information stored. What can we do? So let's go to our segment section, and this is where we start looking at the information that we've got available for us. So now I can press, let's do the update, and the update will go away and it'll find the performance the performance data for our performance insight data for the last 10 minutes from when I triggered the report. Okay, and that's also updating the main, and it's updating the outfeed, and it's also updating the data as well. So we've then got live data coming in, and we've also got some tag log data as well. So I created one called Tech Talk. So let's then say, let's add a new time segment. So we'll add a new time segment, and we're going to give it a name, Tech Talk, and we're just going to pick a relative time, the last 10 minutes. Press OK. OK, so here now is my Tech Talk time segment here, and the thing it's asking me to do is add an item to the list. So we'll add an item to the list, and we notice now, because we've got Performance Insight installed, we now have an extra option for reporting. So I'm just going to select Performance Insight. I'm going to select my in-feed. Where would make me like an operand? what sort of operand shall we have? We can have a numeric operand, and we could go for maybe items produced. So we'll select the items produced and we'll say OK. This then populates the Excel sheet with the information for us. We now press the update button and it will go and get us the items produced for the last 10 minutes. And that's a brief and quick overview of the Calendar and Performance Insight option. And I will now hand over to Dan.
Brilliant. Thanks. That's really good. So let's just share my screen again. Okay, so it's really important for us that we wanted to show it live because I think you'll agree it looks fantastic. The performance is really good. So all the data updates really quickly. The navigation is really quick, and it's really easy to work with. We also wanted to show how we can customize, because obviously we provide a whole lot of custom controls, but sometimes the system integrators and end users have ideas about how they want to display things. So of course you've got this Java interface, JavaScript interface to be able to customize that. Okay, so with the last few minutes, I just want to quickly cover off the Plant Intelligence option license concept and just the promotional package. So we'll have a look at Performance Insight first of all. So within the license concept, we basically have two types of license. So first of all, you get the WinCC Unified Performance Insight base license. What this includes is 3 plant object instances with KPIs. So as Colin just went through, these plant object instances that we can apply KPIs to. And if we look at an example like we showed earlier with the technological hierarchy, here we go. We've got 3 plant intelligence plant object instances: the production line, handling station 1, and packaging station 1. So these are our object instances. So our base license covered here will cover all the KPIs within these plant object instances. We may have a scenario then that we're actually trying to replicate into a second production line. Obviously, the licenses aren't going to cover the second production line, so we have a different type of license, which is the WinCC Unified Performance Insight extension. So we can simply extend it. So by applying an extension license, we can then apply the KPIs to additional plant object instances. So what we need to know in terms of choosing our licenses, we always need a base license, and then how many additional plant object instances are we going to apply with KPIs. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but you've got it if you want to watch it back. We can see that we've got the base license, and these are available in either the package supply on DVD or via online software delivery. It's a little bit cheaper, and it's obviously quicker to get hold of the online software delivery. And then we have the extension licenses themselves that come in packs of 10, 30, 100, or 300. What you need to know is that the base license itself is tied then into the v16. So if you do an upgrade of v16, this is upgrade, and these extension licenses are version independent. So you don't have to upgrade these. So on the calendar side, we have a very similar sort of concept where we have a base calendar license. And this includes a single, let's say, root calendar. So this is the original calendar that you define in engineering. So if we have a look at the technological hierarchy, we've got the root calendar, and then we've got derived instances of that root calendar that we can apply within our overall technological hierarchy. So that's all covered within a single license. If we then decide, if we take that example that we looked at earlier, where we've got a technological hierarchy with a single production line, we want to expand it to a second line. We can use the base license, calendar license, to cover the initial root license and all its derived instances. Then if we want a second independent camera, so this is calendar, this is our second root calendar, we would require an additional calendar extension which would cover that and any of the derived calendars below that. So that means we then have 2 licenses. So the base calendar, and then if we have an extension, so we have an additional root calendar within the project. We also, as I mentioned, we have a bit of a promotion. So if you like the look of some of the options, you want to try these out or get started on your first project, we have an introductory offer that's available until the end of this year. So this discounts the overall list price by 30%. And this includes the calendar option base that we've just seen. So that's a single root calendar with derived instances, the performance insight base for the 3 plant object types, and 100 logging tags to cover the database as well. So that's ordered via online software delivery only, and this is the MLFB for that part number as well. Okay, so probably a little bit over time, but that's our session. So we can, I think, maybe finish the recording now.